Hello, Ivy here. This week's podcast and accompanying article centres on Queen Charlotte, Princess Diana and DoriaRagland and their family lines through history and the impact it has had on the current royal family. The three mothers are connected to the British monarchy either directly or via marriage, and whose children appear to have ruffled the royal establishment figures and protocols, following in two cases, like their respective mothers did, purely by being themselves. In all three family stories, the element of people of colour play a role, and the way the British monarchy reacted to people who had independent thoughts is very similar over the centuries. What does it say about a system that procreates to extend the line of power, and where the firstborn male is treated as though they are anointed by some kind of high power, and the people of the realm are meant to worship them without question? In all three cases, history books show pressures were placed upon individuals who had independent thought, and many hurdles were put in their way. In the case of the first family, there was no tabloid press or social media, so history was written how the royal family wanted people of the future to be informed. Some people were practically erased from history and conversations by changing their names and giving them finance and moving them far away from the royal family itself. There is clearly a history of dumping people in what was deemed at the time to be a faraway place, where they would be forgotten about and where any children involved were not recognised in the line of succession, even though they were born within a marriage and were given new names and titles. Any born outside of marriage are not spoken about, and if they do receive funds, it is not something the general public will ever hear about. In the case of Princess Diana, there was the existence of tabloid media, but as the media has an unwritten contract with the British royal family, any news that was published and circulated around like confetti was such a force that a lone person who had no means of getting their side of the story independent to the same media, life was very difficult when the establishment turned on her. In the case of Prince Harry, tabloid media was banned, and is even worse now. The links between newspaper owners, government officials, aristocracy, and the royal family is strong, and social media is now a major player in the communication industry. Tabloids now also publish their stories online, alongside the falling sales of printed news reports. Therefore, the establishment messages are high volume and play a great part in persuading public opinion. The added element, which none of these partners at the top of the societal tree considered initially, was the input of members of the public from across the globe using social media platforms to question and debunk lies and deception, as well as use it to promote their particular views of the world, as well as use it for fun and entertainment. The addition of a person who was not a member of the British establishment to the mix was majorly underestimated and disrespected in the first few months of the person concerned being linked with Prince Harry. That new person was the then Meghan Markle, someone who the UK media regarded as a low-key USA actress in a little-known TV drama. Meghan has a very strong mother who she has a very close bond with, and DoriaRagland, who has remained silent and dignified, gave her only child a very strong background and education in social issues that exist and how they impacted on ordinary people. Doria worked as a social worker and therefore worked daily with people who the system was trying to help and keep their heads above water. Doria was also a yoga instructor, which by definition allowed her to learn about relaxation and breathing techniques and how to remain calm and in control, along with a fitness approach to day-to-day life. All of the so-called royal experts, better known as the Carnival of Clowns, immediately started to use words in which to describe Meghan and her lifestyle, and it not being typical for the women who marry into the royal family. Phrases to the effect of, "It won't be serious," "It is only a fling," "No way Harry would marry someone like that," etc., etc., started to appear in newspaper articles and TV interviews. All those that said those things were soon to find out that nothing could be further from the truth. They would soon learn that this was a person who was biracial, her description of herself, and who worked hard to achieve her place in the acting profession, and who was a regular member of a hit TV show that had been running for 7 years, was not going to be a pushover for the notorious tabloid royal reporters. Meghan was a multi-millionaire in her own right by hard work and not the birth canal. Meghan is multilingual and double majored in theatre and international relations. Meghan applied for an internship at the US Embassy and, as a result, spent time in Buenos Aires, US Embassy. Meghan already had an interest in politics and initially believed that her future career would be in USA politics. Becoming a successful actress in Suits changed all of that, and then meeting Prince Harry ensured that she was about to enter into an entirely different career environment. The UK media, once realising that Meghan was potentially what she was bringing to the table, then started to amplify royal family concerns. We suspected that, and we now know, of the implications for the royal family life that existed before Meghan, and began to interview royal experts who then began to use the phrase of degree wife, i.e. the marriage, if it took place, would last at most 3 years. The disrespect was huge. This podcast will show the golden thread of circumstance and outcomes which run through all the royals, and you will hopefully come to the conclusion, like I did, that when you track the outline journey of all 3 matriarchs' children and come up to the present day with Harry and Meghan, you will hopefully see the patterns and the evidence of the dark forces going on in current times, and you will see nothing that is happening to the Sussexes is accidental. That is not to say that I think the individuals and organisations behind the treatment considered the consequences of their actions, because I do not believe that for a moment. I believe the traditional tried and tested methods over centuries was considered to be all that was needed. But those people are realising that is no longer the case. Despite that, it seems that they are continuing to do the same things and expecting different outcomes. So, let me take you all on this journey through history, culminating in the Sussex experience. The early life of Charlotte before she became Queen. When Charlotte was 17 years old, she was sent from Germany to marry George III, 5 years her senior. George had ascended the throne following the death of his father, George II, and was as yet unmarried. Since he would soon need an heir of his own, Charlotte was from a minor duchy in the northern part of Germany that had no political machinations. She must have seemed like a perfect match. Charlotte arrived in England on September the 7th, 1761, and the next day met her prospective groom for the first time. She and George were married that evening, just a few hours after meeting. Charlotte spoke no English at first. She learned the language of her new country quickly. Her heavy German accent and her difficult relationship with George's mother, Princess Augusta, made it difficult for her to adapt to English court life. Although Charlotte attempted to expand her social circle, Augusta challenged her every step of the way, even going as far as to replace Charlotte's German ladies-in-waiting with English ladies of Augusta's choosing. Charlotte and King George shared a happy life together, producing 15 children until their lives were changed and saddened by the king's devastating mental illness. Nonetheless, Charlotte remained steadfast and loyal to her husband. Queen Charlotte was widely regarded as mixed race in some circles, but in others quite the opposite, and amongst historians discussions are still ongoing. However, it does appear to be coming down on the side of that she was indeed mixed race, for the following reasons. One historian, as an example, he's not the only one, Mario de Valdez, had argued that Charlotte's ancestry can be traced back to 13th century ruler Alfonso III and his lover, Magdalena, who may have been a Moor, and therefore a black African. This connection comes via Charlotte's 15th century ancestor, Margarita de Castro e Souza, a member of the Portuguese nobility who, some assert, may have been black. The historian also contends that Queen Charlotte has visibly African features in contemporary portraits. However, this idea is also disputed and is mired in stereotypes and racial assumptions. St James's Palace was the official residence of the royal couple, but the king had recently purchased a nearby property, Buckingham House, which later became, once extended, Buckingham Palace as we know it today. In 1762, the King and Queen moved into this new house, making it to Buckingham Palace. Charlotte loved it. 14 of her children were born there, and it came to be known as the Queen's House. Queen Charlotte also purchased Frogmore House in Windsor Park in 1792 as a country retreat for her and her unmarried daughters. Frogmore played a key part in the celebration of King George III's Golden Jubilee in 1809. The Queen was also an amateur botanist who took great interest in Kew Gardens. Kew Palace, then known as the Dutch House, was bought by George III in 1781 as a family home. Charlotte's interest in botany led to the South African flower, the bird of paradise, being named in her honour. Many places around the world have been named after Queen Charlotte. Charlottetown, Prince Edward Island, Canada. Queen Charlotte Bay, West Falkland. Queen Charlotte Sound, South Island, New Zealand. Charlottesville, Virginia, USA. Charlotte, North Carolina, USA. And Mecklenburg County, Virginia, USA. I thought it useful to mention another queen that was on the scene long before Queen Charlotte, who was also a person of colour, and that was actually established and agreed for her in most cases, and I've included it because of the description, how someone actually described this particular queen. And when we refer to how paintings descriptions of people generally around that time that were people of colour. They were depicted as white or possibly with a little shade, but no reference was made to their actual ethnicity. So this particular Queen Consort I wanted to mention because I think it's important that it was rare for it to be recorded in this way. So this lady is Philippa Hainault, Queen Consort in the Low Counties, now known as Belgium. So an official recorded person of colour before Queen Charlotte. Philippa of Hainault was born 24th of June 1314 and died in August 1369. Was the Queen Consort of Edward III. She was the daughter of the Count of Hainault in the Low Counties, now in Belgium, an area that had once been ruled by Moorish tribes. It would appear that perhaps in Philippa there was a genetic throwback to the darker colouring of the erstwhile rulers. Edward II sent a man to Hainault to report back on his son's heir's muted bride. The man gave the following feedback. The lady whom we saw has not uncomely hair betwixt blue-black and brown. Her head is clean-shaped, her forehead high and broad, and standing somewhat forward. Her face narrows between the eyes, and the lower part of her face is still more narrow and slender than the forehead. Her eyes are dark. Her nose is fairly smooth and even, save that is somewhat broad at the tip and flattened, yet it is no snub nose. Her nostrils are also broad. Her mouth fairly wide. Her lips somewhat full, and especially the lower lip. All her limbs are well set and unmaimed, and naught is amiss so far as a man may see. Moreover, she's brown of skin all over, and much like her father, and in all things she is pleasant enough, as it seems to us. End of quote. So much I could say about that, but I leave you all to come to your own thoughts on it. At least it's recorded somewhere. No contemporary images of Philippa exist. Those that we have show a very standard, delicate-featured, Caucasoid woman, absolutely nothing like the woman that the little brown girl described above would have grown into. I have included an image of one of the paintings done of Philippa in the article and more narrative around it if you want to research further for her. And there are web links in the reference sources for all of the people that I talk about in this podcast, and in particular the ladies of colour. Philippa was an avid patron of the arts, a capable regent when her husband was away warring, and a prolific mother. She was known for her kindness and restraint, frequently interceding with her husband and successfully pleading for the lives of those who had been sentenced to die. Philippa is also known to be the most royal Queen Consort of England, due to 4 of her great-great-grandfathers, all having been kings of France, Aragon, Naples and Hungary. Going to look at now Prince Charlotte's 6th child, Frederick, who became the first Duke of Sussex. So the majority of this narrative about the Dukes of Sussex centres more on this first Duke, not least to prepare the ground for the comparisons and similarities with the present day, of which we already know so much. So please bear with me as I spend time on the summary of the first Duke, along with the way you will each most likely identify things that link to Prince Harry's situation in some way or another. There is truly a wealth of information out there about most members of the British royal family going back centuries. This podcast barely touches the surface of the information about the 12 siblings of the first Duke of Sussex, let alone the information about his parents, whose mother, as we've said, was considered to be mixed race by a few brave historians. But on the whole, most historians did not comment about it. So, first Duke of Sussex, Prince Augustus Frederick. Born on the 27th of January, 1773, in Buckingham House, London. Died on the 21st of April, 1843, aged 70. Residence, Kensington Palace. He was buried on the 4th of May, 1843, and it's worth stating here that Prince Augustus specifically requested not to be buried on any royal estate. Hence, he was buried in Kensal Green Cemetery in London, opposite his sister, Princess Sophia, another outsider in some ways, as she was an unmarried mother with one child, with the names of two possible men who could be the father. The first Duke was married twice. His first spouse was Lady Augusta Murray. The marriage took place in 1793 against the wishes and without the approval of the monarch. The marriage was subsequently annulled in 1794 on the grounds that the prince did not seek approval from the monarch and got married anyway. The monarch never approved of the marriage, hence the reason it was annulled. Second marriage was to Lady Cecilia Underwood, which took place in 1831. Both times Augustus married for love, but the monarch did not approve of either of the chosen spouses, and so did not approve either of the marriages. As a direct result of this, neither of the Duke's children were considered legitimate heirs to the title. The parents of Prince Augustus was King George III, as said, and Queen Charlotte. Queen Charlotte, as we've already said, is listed by a few historians as being of mixed race. Most of the paintings of the Queen also confirm this point, but as per usual with such matters, particularly in those times, history was not so much rewritten, but the ethnic origin was just not referred to in the majority of the official records. I make this point because of the political causes that became a focus for Prince Augustus and which were very unpopular with the British royal family at the time. One could argue, successfully in my opinion, that there seems a lot of denial about Queen Charlotte's ethnicity, but there are written pieces which state that the Queen Charlotte comes from Portuguese family line and she is indeed of mixed race. Prince Augustus took up causes that I suspect his mother would have been more than proud, just like the current Duke of Sussex. Causes such as agreements in and vocal about his views to abolish slavery, reformation of Parliament, Catholic emancipation, and the removal of existing civil restrictions on Jews and dissenters, which referred to Protestant Christians who separated from the Church of England in the 17th and 18th centuries. When Prince Augustus met his first wife, he met her in Italy. She was the second daughter of the Earl of Dunmore. The couple secretly got married in Rome on the 4th of April 1793. The King's Minister of Hanover Affairs was sent to Italy to escort him back to London. The couple married again without revealing their full identities at St George's, Hanover Square, Westminster. Both marriages took place without the consent or even the knowledge of his father. In August 1794, the prince's first marriage was annulled, as we've said, on the grounds that it contravened the Royal Marriages Act 1772, as it was not approved by the king. The prince continued to live with Lady Augusta until 1801, when he received a parliamentary grant of 12,000 and the couple separated. Lady Augusta retained custody of their children and received a maintenance of £4,000 a year. In 1806, Lady Augusta was given royal licence to use the surname of DoriaRagland instead of Murray. A year after the death of his first wife, Augustus married a second time in 1831, again in contravention of the Royal Marriages Act, to Lady Cecilia, the eldest daughter of Arthur Gore, 2nd Earl of Arran, and Elizabeth Underwood, a widow. On the same day, Lady Cecilia assumed the surname Underwood by royal licence. She was never titled or recognised as the Duchess of Sussex. However, she was created the Duchess of Inverness in her own right by Queen Victoria in 1840. It's worth mentioning here that Inverness link is not random as such. It was when that second marriage was also annulled by the monarch. They moved Cecilia to Scotland, which in that time was deemed to be a far away place, and that was where the Inverness link came in terms of her title, but she was never ever recognised as the Duchess of Sussex. So, coming back to present day, despite various tricks and games played by the current setup within the royal family, Meghan, despite all what they've done, is officially recorded as the Duchess of Sussex, and she is the first Duchess of Sussex as a result of what they did to Cecilia. Wasn't recognised, and her children were not recognised. And therefore, the title of Duke of Sussex could not be handed down to any of his children when he died. I'll quickly say here, just link that to the various things that are being muted now by whoever within the royal family about the Sussex children, whether or not they want any titles, whether or not they want anything that the royal family wishes to give to them and by right. You can see from history that the monarch, as has happened with the first Duke of Sussex's two wives who they did not approve of, one of whom he had two children with, by not recognising those children, by not moving them away from London, therefore those children were not considered to be able to succeed their father, the title of Duke of Sussex. They were treated as if they were born out of wedlock. The only difference was when children were born out of wedlock with royal families in those times, and I suspect it continues today, but that's another story. Children do receive money. There are funds given to children born out of wedlock, but they're not recognised. Children that are born within a royal marriage that is not recognised by the monarch also are penalised and are not recognised, but more money is given to those wives and their children, but they will never inherit any sort of title, will never be recognised as being royal. So just look at that when they start talking about Archie and Lilibet. Whether or not those children wish to have those titles when they become 18, that's for them to decide. But just know that there's precedent already set by a sitting monarch being able to stop that by how they define children of people who the royal family deemed to have not adhered to rules and protocols, etc., etc. Let's come on to Princess Diana. And I start off with one of many quotes that I include in the article. This one is, "Anywhere I see suffering, that is where I want to be, doing what I can." End of quote. Throughout her life, Diana devoted herself to serving others, especially those without a voice. She was president or patron of over 100 charities as part of her royal duties, many of which did work on behalf of homeless and disabled people, children and people with HIV/AIDS. After 1996, Diana continued to work as either patron or president for Centrepoint, the English National Ballet, Leprosy Mission, the National AIDS Trust, Hospital for Sick Children, Great Ormond Street, and the Royal Marsden Hospital. In the year before she died, Diana tirelessly campaigned to ban the manufacture and use of landmines. Another quote from Diana: "Every one of us needs to show how much we care for each other, and in the process, care for ourselves." Diana made many visits to North America, visiting hospices, schools, charities and fundraising galas, and touched the lives of many wherever she went. Other major overseas visits included Angola, Australia, Bosnia, Egypt, India, Pakistan, and many European countries. The Princess spoke out on a wide range of issues and used her high profile to raise awareness as well as funds for charitable causes. She is rightly recognised and respected today as a true humanitarian. Ken Wolfe, a former Met Police officer, has accused the royals of being envious of Diana's popularity with the British public in 1997. But he believes her sons, Prince William and Prince Harry, have carried on her legacy. Ken Wolfe said, "Her efforts to modernise the family has been reflected in her royal engagements, as well as in how she raised William and Harry." Ken shared she would take them to Kensington High Street, take them to the cinema. They were regulars at Bill Wyman's Sticky Fingers restaurant. And of the princess's popularity, Ken added, "The problem with Diana in this family is they could not deal with her popularity. They couldn't cope with it. Basically, they were jealous. They couldn't do it themselves, and they wouldn't acknowledge just how good she was at it. This was a problem." Their attitude was, "This has been going on for 100 years. Let's not wreck it." They weren't moving with the times and couldn't honestly bring it round to say, "We've got somebody here who is changing its direction." Who does that remind you of now? Then we come on to Prince Harry. A little bit of history about the Duke of Sussex title in terms of ownership and the history of it. The Duke of Sussex title has only ever been used twice in the peerage of the United Kingdom. The current Duke of Sussex is Prince Harry, and the previous holder of the title was Prince Augustus Frederick, the sixth son of King George III. Prince Augustus was given the title of the Duke of Sussex on the 24th of November 1801, along with the following titles: Baron Arklow and Earl of Inverness. The second creation of the Duke of Sussex title, which takes its name from the county of Sussex in England, was announced on the 19th of May 2018 and made official by letters patent on the 16th of July 2018 to Prince Harry. The current heir apparent is Archie Mountbatten Windsor. Prince Harry holds subsidiary titles of the Earl of Dumbarton and Baron of Kilkeel. Earl of Dumbarton is a title of Scottish nobility, referring to Dumbarton in the area of West Dumbartonshire in Scotland. The title has been created twice, once in 1675 in the Peerage of Scotland, and then a second time, but once in the Peerage of the UK in 2018. There were a few dukedoms vacant for the Queen to choose from as the wedding approached. They were Clarence, Connaught, Kendal, Ross, Sussex and Windsor. There was also a number of unoccupied dukedoms, including Cumberland and Albany. At the time, Lucy Hume from Debrett's peerage was of the opinion that Prince Harry would only receive English and Scottish titles, whereas Prince William, being higher in the line of succession, would receive 3, which would include Ireland. Debrett's anticipated that the Queen would choose from the vacant dukedoms, which she did in fact do. Lucy also stated that the factors that might be taken into account include who held the title previously and whether or not there were any negative connotations. Windsor had negative connotations, as it was the title given to Edward after his abdication in 1936. Experts felt that Sussex was the favourite, with Clarence being the next most likely. The Duke of Sussex title became extinct around 200 years ago, as we've just discussed. The previous holder of the title didn't have any legitimate heirs, and there is no terrible or controversial history associated with the title. Let me state here that I wholeheartedly disagree with that last point regarding the choice of the Sussex dukedom not having any controversy attached to it. I'll come on to my reasons later. The titles can be inherited, but cease to be called royal once they pass beyond the grandsons of a monarch. As with any peerage, once the title becomes extinct, it may subsequently be recreated by the reigning monarch at any time. Now let's have a look at Meghan and when she joined Harry in the UK in 2016. UK meltdowns began. A brief summary of Meghan's work experiences, including charitable projects, and also who worked for 7 years on the TV hit Suits. Working as a global ambassador for World Vision, Meghan wrote an article for Time called How Periods Affect Potential, about the way menstruation can hinder a woman's potential if she doesn't have access to tampons and pads. Markle wrote, I travelled to Delhi and Mumbai this January with World Vision to meet girls and women directly impacted by the stigmatisation of menstrual health and to learn how it hinders girls' education. 113 million adolescent girls between the ages of 12 to 14 in India alone are at risk of dropping out of school because of the stigma surrounding menstrual health. Meghan also supported World Vision's Clean Water campaign in Rwanda in 2016. Supporting the Minor Malia Foundation. Meghan's work with the foundation is also tied to her support of World Vision. According to Vanity Fair, at this organisation, women manufacture sanitary pads to sell in communities. The effort not only provides their resources to girls, but also fosters open communication about menstruation. Meghan's commitment to women's issues and the open discussion of topics such as menstruation is important for communities everywhere. Meghan was also a One Young World counsellor. One Young World's mission is to gather young leaders from around the world, help them make lasting connections and create positive change. Meghan was a counsellor in One Young World Summit in Dublin, Ireland in 2014 and Ottawa in Canada in 2016. At 2016 summit, she delivered a talk alongside Justin Trudeau and famously called out the Suits creator for gender inequality for requiring her character to do so many semi-naked scenes on the show. Meghan was also an advocate for the United Nations. In November 2016, Meghan wrote for Elle UK about her experiences working with the United Nations. I was in a van heading back to a refugee camp in Rwanda. I was there as an advocate for UN Women. I had a week of meetings with female parliamentarians in the city's capital, celebrating the fact that 64% of the Rwandan government are women, the first in the world anywhere where women hold a majority. Meghan made her dedication to humanitarian work clear in the essay, writing, "This type of work is what feeds my soul. The degree to which I can do that, both on and off camera, is a direct perk of my job." Standing up for gender inequality when she was 11. Meghan's advocacy on behalf of women began when she was just 11 years old. Upon seeing a sexist advertisement on TV, Meghan wrote letters to Hillary Clinton, Linda Ellaby, Gloria Allred, and the company responsible for the ad. Meghan received replies from all three women, and the soap company changed the wording in the commercial. As Meghan revealed at the UN Women's Conference in Beijing in 2015. The soap manufacturer Procter & Gamble changed the commercial for their Ivory Clear Dish washing liquid. They changed it from "Women all over America are fighting greasy pots and pans" to "People all over America." It was at that moment that I realised the magnitude of my actions. At the age of 11, I had created my small level of impact by standing up for equality. Voting. Meghan posted on Instagram, "Exercise your right to vote. Sadly, not everyone in the world has it, so if you do, please let your voice be heard." She has continually encouraged women to speak up for themselves and exercise the power they have to inform politics. Whilst Meghan is no longer patron of the Royal National Theatre and the Association of Commonwealth Universities, she still has ties to SmartWorks and the Mayhew Animal Charity. Similarities running through history between the current and former Duke of Sussex. They are considered somewhat rebellious, e.g. they challenge age-old traditions and shatter royal stereotypes. Queen Victoria considered the first Duke of Sussex to be her favourite uncle, who did the honour of escorting her down the aisle when she married Prince Albert in 1840. An unspoken attitude to the existence of mixed race within royalty at that time. I would say that not much has changed. Prince Harry had to officially request permission to marry Meghan. With the world looking, the Queen did not opt to refuse, yet as we all know now, and most people acknowledge, that this was not one rogue member of staff, but a concerted effort by the British royal family to ensure that no wedding took place. I personally feel that even if the Queen had refused permission, Harry would have married Meghan anyway. In my mind, he is very similar to the first Duke of Sussex. History gives an insight on how the monarch has the power to erase hereditary entitlement or recognition, if they so wish, under a variety of legislation and acts that only royals would ever have the need to use. The wording of the very acts themselves meant that no person outside of that structure could call upon it. Note how names are changed, like the first Duke of Sussex first wife, using a name from her side of the family, and was in effect given money and a different title to make it look better, but she and her children were still excluded, but sugar-coated by giving her a Scottish title and lived at a distance. When Augustus died, it was deemed he had no legitimate children to pass on his Duke of Sussex title, even though they had been born with a legitimate marriage, but one that was not approved by the monarch. Meghan's removal from Archie's birth certificate, but her title remaining, is significant in my opinion. History will show the royalty element, but no mention of the person behind the title. Slavery mentality in full view. Without giving ideas to people, I can see a variety of ways the British royal family could have used aspects of royal law and procedures to other Meghan if Harry had put the royal family first. Harry leaving scuppered much of that scope of choice, I am sure. I maintain the choice of the Sussex dukedom was not accidental, though I think the royal family had different ideas in terms of its relevance than a sane-thinking, non-misogynistic person could see. I am sure that there was a very high element of shade when the choice was made, and very little of it was seen in a positive light, but courtiers and media could spin it like it was a fabulous wedding gift to the couple. I believe that the first Duke of Sussex would have liked Harry and Meghan. They stood their ground when all around them were shooting poison arrows. The first Duke married who he wanted, despite family opposition that he knew would follow. Both of his marriages were for love, and he did his best in the times that he lived in to secure payments for his first wife and children before they separated for good. The annulment made no difference to the emotions involved. Augustus was never considered at the level of other brothers in the family. He was seen as the weak one due to his asthma, and yet he was the one who quietly became very interested in arts and music and politics, and very outspoken on slavery and race issues. He was very well read too. His living quarters were never as palatial as others in his family, but he travelled a lot and experienced more about life outside of royalty. Prince Harry had a tiny 2-bedroom cottage on Kensington Palace grounds. He was always treated like second best. When he asked for accommodation for him as a married man, he was allocated Frogmore Cottage, not a section of Frogmore House. Former servants' quarters, and still the smallest accommodation by far compared to the rest of the wider family. In the same grounds of Frogmore is another royal who was deemed to be a rebel, Edward, who gave up the throne to marry Wallis Simpson. Everything thrown Harry's way, on the face of things, looked easy to spin in the media, but when examined closely, it was, and is, all shade. Harry paying the faux renovation costs for a property that had designated funds in the sovereign grant in one go, scuppered the 12-year repayment deal that the royal family tried to sell to Harry. It is no coincidence that the Cambridge children would become adults in 10 and 12 years respectively, in terms of George and Charlotte. So once again, trying to use him as the royal workhorse and whipping boy for distraction press coverage, but still prepared to cast him aside at the British royal family convenience in 12 years' time, under the disguise of him paying back a fictitious debt. You can see already how the institution is trying to do to Harry and Meghan's children what was done to the first Duke of Sussex's 2 children, i.e. remove them from the line of inheriting anything from their father upon his death. Packed off into the background, with his mother allocated a name from her mother's side of the family, and over time, meaning it would take an element of prior knowledge to find details of this lady and her 2 children. My takeaway from looking into the life of the first Duke of Sussex is that Prince Harry has more in common with the first Duke on the things that royalty want to pretend does not exist, or did not happen in that way. The royal family were trying to appear generous and celebrating the marriage, when in fact every so-called gift was a rotten apple, and much like their day-to-day life, it was all performative and nothing of real substance. I think of both Dukes of Sussex as kindred spirits, who married who they loved, and did not follow royal tradition and protocol just because it was there. They both were and are independent thinkers, and who were involved in wider initiatives outside of the tradition royal family performative tasks. I think that the Dukes would have liked each other, and the mixed race element in the family line, despite what the majority of records show, is an added joy. The Sussexes are making history with a range of innovative projects which are benefiting a wide scope of people. Meghan is the first Duchess of Sussex, not least because the Queen could not be seen to refuse the marriage, so despite trying other activities to destroy this union, the fact remains that history will show Meghan's name and title. Just like the American birth certificate, so the one amended in the UK is the only document that is different compared to the others in history books of the future as to the reasons behind the amendment. Conclusion. Queen Charlotte, Princess Diana and DoriaRagland all had their share of being treated differently, simply because of their independent thought. Whilst Queen Charlotte should and could have taken over royal business when it became clear that her husband was indisposed due to his deteriorating mental health, there were moves within the royal establishment to keep Queen Charlotte away from royal business. It seems that Queen Charlotte was not too upset about that, and put her talents towards other things, which still stand and or written about in history books, and which are still sought after today. The names of those who opposed her involvement in royal life, not so much. Of the 15 children that Charlotte and her husband, King George III, had, it was the 6th child, Frederick Augustus, and one of his sisters, Princess Sophia, who did not act in accordance with royal procedures and protocol at all times. Frederick became the first Duke of Sussex, as explained earlier, and he specifically gave instructions that when he died, he did not want to be buried on royal land. It was clear that he had a fractured relationship with his father, and his children born within one of his marriages were removed from succession of the Duke of Sussex title, and they and their mother were moved to Scotland and their name changed, and given annual sums to live on. Over time, no one would really be aware that they were once royalty. Frederick's sister was a single mother, with question marks over 2 males who could be the father of her child. Both are buried in a non-royal cemetery, as stated earlier in the article. It seems that the British royal family still refuse to move with the times, using old methods that will not be successful in today's climate, and if truth be told, has not worked for many decades. One would think that having a couple like the Sussexes would be considered an asset to the royal family. Instead, Sussexes have had to leave the UK for the sake of their mental health and have stepped back from senior royal duties. The mouthpiece of the royal family, i.e. the UK tabloid media, continues to hound them on another continent, but they are still safer than in the UK. I am certain the law will soon curtail the illegal behaviour by media people on a USA family. The UK are playing fast and loose with Sussex security in the UK, going as far as refusing to allow Prince Harry to pay for additional security from the Met Police, alongside his own security people, because of the intel information that the Met Police will have and a private security organisation will not. Other people pay for Met Police services, but the son of the next king has been refused, despite there being 2 incidents in 2021 where Prince Harry's safety was compromised, including paparazzi chasing the car that Prince Harry was in as a passenger. Which set of circumstances does that remind you of? The UK want to pick and choose when to continuously print stories asking if the Sussexes are going to attend this or that in the UK. Not because they like them, but because they make more money printing stories about them, even though they will be treated harshly in whatever fantasy tale is written by each royal reporter. How any PR team which the royal family profess to have hired in recent times can think this kind of daily harassment and increasing risk to a prince of the realm is in any way looking good for the monarchy and its future. It's beyond me. All based on fragile egos, which ultimately will be the main cause of the demise of the UK monarchy. There are more than enough members of the royal family involved in questionable activity, but instead the UK continues to harass the family, who refuse to be a distraction to others' activities by being the royal punchbag for media to earn coins. It is not going to be accepted, and the people who will lose the most are those who currently cannot hide their jealousy and racism. Not a good look for a family who still are exempt from equality laws of the UK, and who are now planning visits to countries who are not in the Commonwealth. The red flags are appearing about the timeline of the UK monarchy. Countdown has begun. Just watch. There was an article printed in the Washington Post in 2018, in fact, the day before the marriage of Harry and Meghan, which I think sums up the theme running through UK royal history from the 13th century to the present day, and at the heart of the treatment of those with independent thought, wrong shade of skin, or who outshone the heirs to the throne. Nothing has changed, and the common denomination remained the same. This is why it will ultimately come to an end in the UK. The article was written by Petula Dvorak and goes as follows. The British calendar is splattered with bloody anniversaries commemorating hundreds of years of violent battles and murdered monarchs. So, finding an untainted date for the wedding of Meghan and Harry was fraught with historical landmines. May the 26th, on that day, in 946, King Edmund the Magnificent was murdered at a party in Pucklechurch. June the 8th, on that day, in 1042, King Harthonut dropped dead at a wedding banquet. Officially, he drank too much and had a stroke, but poisoning conspiracy theories abound. June the 14th, that was the day in 1645 that at least 1,000 royalists were slaughtered at the Battle of Naseby. How about July the 1st? In 1916, it marked the beginning of the Battle of the Somme, one of the bloodiest battles in all of recorded military history. Come on, royals, you didn't see this one coming. May the 19th, the day Meghan and Harry will marry, is the same date that red-headed King Henry VIII had his wife, the fashionable and outspoken Anne Boleyn, executed. Oh, and Harry's real name is Henry. In a royal court sodden with etiquette that dictates everything from the way a cup is held to the way legs are crossed, how did anyone rubber stamp a wedding date on such a horrific anniversary? Royal historian and Anne Boleyn biographer Claire Ridgway said, "It would be tricky to find a date in English history that is not linked to something awful. I don't think the link to Anne Boleyn came into the equation when picking the date. It would have been based on what worked out best with the busy lives of the royal family," Ridgway demurred. Sure, that's possible. Other historians believe that the family did look at the date and all its connections between past and present, but decided to keep calm and carry on. Hannah Jewell, our own British-American pop culture host, explains Prince Harry's engagement to Meghan Markle. David Johansen from the Washington Post also commented, "I think the royal family would almost certainly have considered the fact that the date is the anniversary of Anne Boleyn's execution," said Elizabeth Norton, a British historian who specialises in English queens and the Tudor period. But she believes any bad juju has long since vanished with the passage of time. The British remember Anne Boleyn, the subject of countless books and movies, but not May the 19th. It's not marked on any calendar the way Guy Fawkes Night is. It's not a May the 8th like VE Day, when World War II ended in Europe, which is still celebrated and remembered as a date, Norton said, or like September the 11th in the United States. Anne Boleyn's execution is obviously not an event that is still commemorated, but it is remembered to some extent. Anne's story is very well known. I expect that the royal family reasoned that it was long enough ago and not widely enough known to be a problem. Even so, she said, it is hardly an auspicious date for a commoner to be marrying into the royal family. And as the 500th anniversary of Anne's death approaches in 2036, there will be considerable publicity about the coincidence of the date. Henry VIII was married when the ravishing Anne Boleyn caught his eye. He tried to make her part of his harem of willing mistresses, but she insisted on marriage. As we all know, Henry went on to marry 4 more times to Jane Seymour, Anne of Cleves, Catherine Howard and Catherine Parr. When he died in 1547, he was buried in St George's Chapel. Hello, that's where Meghan and Harry's wedding took place on May the 19th. I'll end this podcast now with a few more words from Ken Worth. I have a number of issues with things he has said, particularly recently, but these words were spot on. He explained, "We now know Diana did change and modernise, whether we like it or not. Now it is so different from what royalty was in the 1980s. And of the princess's popularity, Ken added, the problem with Diana in this family is that they could not deal with her popularity. They couldn't cope with it. They were jealous. They couldn't do it themselves, and they wouldn't acknowledge just how good she was at it. This was a problem. Their attitude was, this has been going on for a few hundred years, let's not wreck it. They weren't moving with the times, and they couldn't honestly bring it round to say, we've got somebody here who is changing its direction. This is what they tried to do to Meghan, and ultimately Harry as well. But they are now already trying to duplicate Harry and Meghan, and in one person's case has gone from dressing like Princess Diana to the Duchess of Sussex now. After 20 years, this individual is still trying to find her own identity, because somewhere, whatever she entered the royal family with has long since been removed and left behind an empty shell, dressed to the orders of royal people, because I very much doubt that this has come from the lady herself. All I see are people trying to copy clothing styles or personalities. Until they develop a style and a personality of their own that is of interest to the masses, then the institution is doomed. I am referring here to all of the tax-funded royal family members, visiting cash-rich nations whilst ignoring the ones the UK likes to hang on to on paper as it clings to its empire days, who are part of the Commonwealth, is not a good look. Trying to strengthen the hold on a UK monarchy from external funds outside the established parameters is questionable. Harry and Meghan, just like the first Duke of Sussex, developed projects and interests outside the traditional activities of the royal family. Augustus Frederick was well-travelled and as a result came across many experts in various subjects, which informed the way he took on causes. The Sussexes are developing a global portfolio and basically are leaving the UK monarchy in the dust clouds. Like the first Duke of Sussex, all the refusals and barriers placed in their way have proved to be stepping stones to further success. The UK British royal family still have not learned any lessons from a few hundred years of doing the same things, producing the same results, which are of little benefit to current society. I'll end the podcast there. I hope you found that interesting. I'm sorry it was so long, and even that was a summary, trust me, on all three family lines. But there are several reference sources listed at the end of the article, should you wish to start a journey of research into any one of those people or their family lines. You will become, I think, hooked. Anyway, that's it for this week. I will speak to you all next Sunday. Bye for now. Bye from Ivy. Bye.